Apple's 2021 event was just a couple days ago, and they refreshed one of the longest standing product designs, I think, in tech history. I mean, honestly, when was the last time you saw a product go 12 to 14 years without a major design change? Like, yeah, the iMacs got a little bit of a thinner profile about 5 years ago, but they kept the general aesthetic for well over a decade. And that's kind of insane in the tech space. So needless to say, there was a lot of anticipation regarding what the new iMacs were going to look like and how they would perform, right? Were they going to have color options? How thin would they be? What about the chin on the iMac? Thinner bezels, new processor, lots of hype for sure. And I'll be totally honest, I was kind of acutely underwhelmed, right? And I know I'm not the only one. MKBHD and Austin Evans also voiced some of their disapproval as far as the design goes. And so I know I'm not the only one. So here it is, everything wrong with the brand new iMacs. Number one, it's too thin. And I know, there's no such thing as too thin, but yeah, there actually is. When making a product slimmer causes other problems, your product is too thin. And making the iMacs as thin as they are definitely caused other problems. In fact, basically all of the problems with the iMac stem from the fact that it is too thin, which is so dumb because literally no one was expecting the iMacs to be as thin as they are. So the design was totally unnecessary. No one was thinking like, they better make these iMacs, 11 millimeters thick or I'm gonna lose it, right? Like no one was thinking that. And for crying out loud, it's thinner than a MacBook Pro and in some areas thinner than a MacBook Air. Literally no one cares at that point in time. They could have easily made the iMac about an inch thick or not even that thick, right? And resolved every problem with the iMac in one fell swoop. Problems, of course, like the following. Number two, the chin. Honestly, the chin is such an outdated design in general, but especially the way Apple handled it. The only cool things about the chin before this new iteration was that it was the same piece of aluminum as the rest of the case, so it kind of had this industrial feel to it, which Apple has been so good at designing products that look like that. And then it had the Apple logo on it. Now, I think logos on computers are usually pretty tacky, right? It's really difficult to make a logo that looks good as far as a design choice goes on computers, but Apple is one of those few exceptions to the rules, right? Because of the ecosystem that Apple has created and all of the branding and design choices they've made over the years, even from the early days with Steve Jobs, right? Apple has created brand loyalists, right? And this is a big deal because when so much of your customer base is made up of superfans, your logo becomes a status symbol more than marketing material, right? So obviously the iMac still has a unique design and it's easily identifiable, but by removing the logo from the chin, the iMac looks a little bit less like Apple and a little bit more like an accident. And it's glass now. And I don't get this move in the industry back to things covered in glass. No one likes fingerprints and they don't like shattered screens and they're a pain to clean off, but whatever. So it would have just been better to remove the chin entirely by moving the internals up into the iMac and placing them behind the screen. But of course, why couldn't Apple do that? Because they were so focused on making the iMac so stupidly thin. So number three, if you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, I'm just kidding, that's not a real thing. But seriously, if you haven't yet, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe if you like this kind of content and you haven't already. So number three, the proprietary power cable. I think this is so dumb, right? But I should clarify, I think the magnetic connection is actually pretty cool. I'm really looking forward to the return of MagSafe, which is something that the iMac has never had. So I'm okay with it from that standpoint. Plus, Apple has made proprietary cables since like the beginning of time. So it's not a big deal to me that the cable is proprietary. What bothers me is how they handled it, okay? First of all, you couldn't use a typical power cable. Why? The iMac is too thin, right? The male end of your connector is literally thicker than your iMac, which again, that would be a non-issue if they weren't so determined to starve the space out of their products. But they were, so now we need a new power brick and a new cable. But if you need a new cable, why not just make it USB-C? That way you could literally use the same power brick as your MacBook Pro. Since the iMac is now running M1, it's got a similar TDP, and the power consumption would be very similar, if not identical, to the MacBook Pro. And then you could use just one cable and one power brick, and you wouldn't need to spend money on useless electronic products. But oh well, I guess Apple isn't as green as they pretend to be. And I know people like the fact that on the higher end iMacs, you have a gigabit Ethernet port on the power bricks because it means one less cable to have on your desk. But come on, you don't really think that's why they did that, do you? Like, of course not. The Ethernet port is on the power brick because the iMac is too thin to have it on the computer, right? It's literally like the industrial designer over the iMac project was like, make it really thin, put the M1 in it, and then see if we can do anything to improve it, right? Their focus was just entirely on making it thin, and I think thinness was the wrong thing to focus on. Number 4, in terms of their design flaws, was the white bezels. Honestly, bezels being white is just kind of jarring, right? People want to see bezels less and less, and as time goes on, and we've gotten used to seeing them in black. And if Apple would have kept the bezels black, this wouldn't be a talking point. But the fact that the bezels are white makes them stick out like a sore thumb, and it makes us notice them more, not less, right? It's like no matter how much thinner you make the bezels, if you make them hot pink, they're going to be distracting, right? So even though white and lighter tones are making a comeback in the design industry after darker designs in 2019 and 2020, I feel like it was a really poor choice to make the bezels white, and it did not help at all. But that's it for the design side of things, I promise. It's like they chose neither form nor function with the design. And in typical Apple fashion, they essentially said, I know what you said you want, but try this instead, right? If they would have made the chassis just a little thicker, all of these problems would go away, and we'd get the iMac everyone wanted. But now, let's go ahead and move on to the hardware. Number 5 is really the only thing that I have beef with as far as the hardware goes, and that is the selection of ports. Now, I know Apple users are really getting used to that dongle life, but it really would have been nice to see at least one USB-A port on the iMac, especially since the iMac is kind of marketed towards general consumers, and general consumer products aren't all USB-C or USB 4 yet. The vast majority of them are still USB-A, and the last iMac had 4 USB-A ports, so to just cut all of those accessories loose with one update, I think was kind of a little mean. But of course, the iMac is too thin to have the USB-A port on the back, and so I think they still could have had it on the side, but the logic was kind of not the MO as far as the new iMacs are concerned. So they just decided to get rid of the USB-A ports altogether. And there you have it. That's everything that I think is wrong with the new iMacs. And really, I think it was just the one problem, thinness, right, that created a bunch more problems. But there were some things that I think they got right, like I think a better webcam, an improved sound system, and of course moving over to the M1 were all good things. But I felt like their focus really wasn't in the right place, and that caused a bunch of problems. I wasn't bothered that the iMacs weren't touch. I think touch is way more useful on laptops than on a desktop anyway. I don't think you should be sitting so close to a screen, on a 24-inch screen, that you should be able to touch it consistently. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Am I just a hater on these iMacs? Am I blind to good design? Or do you agree with me that the design was kind of a flop from Apple? Seriously though, let me know. I'd love to read and respond to your thoughts. But until next time, I will see you later.